Yeah. I guess we can probably get started. I don't know who else will be coming
Yeah,
in.
Richard said he'll be late, but that he's coming.
Yeah, I have somebody else who might be coming that I met yesterday, but I'm not sure if she'll make it.
If it's not a good time, we can also ask folks, what a better time would be.
I'm okay with this time so far. I don't know how so what time is it for you guys over
5. It's gonna be 6 starting next week. We
yeah.
daylight save 3 weeks later for some reason.
Forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me.
The only thing is it's not very like Asia friendly, but I
Yeah.
don't think we've had a ton of interest from the Asian community yet, so okay. I guess we can get started. Let's do it. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the DataOps Initiative meeting. I think this is probably our third or fourth meeting at this point. So excited to see that we're still alive, which I hope that it remains that way for a while. And why don't we do like a quick round of introductions? I think everybody here knows each other already, but we can just do a really quick round. My name's Lisa. I work at Data Strato. We do metadata management and cataloging. Roxana, if you want to go.
I'm Roxanne. I work for the CD Foundation. I do all of the content and editing, and so I'll be helping the initiative get the word out there.
And Jesse, if you want to go next.
Jesse, formerly Air Force IT infrastructure and also formal federal employee. Tongue twister there.
Awesome.
Victor, independent, semi-retired.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Great title.
And if you haven't added yourself to the meeting notes, please do. And I'm gonna send a link in the chat here, but you can also find it in the meeting invite. And so I don't know if Roxanne, do you want to show your screen and go over some of the changes that you did? So we're just gonna get into some of the admin stuff and then we'll get into birds of a feather. Oh, you're muted.
Of course. It's pretty much the same thing that I showed. It's just better laid out, nicer colors, more spacing. If you see anything that should be fixed, let me know. I put the link in the document. And we have our meetings. I put contributors. Victor, I couldn't find a big enough picture of you on LinkedIn. So if you could send it to me, then I will put it there. Jesse, if you want to be there, of course, I'll add you as well. And then we have the recordings and events. We'll add them as they change. And the blog post, we'll also add them once we have more. But yeah, I think it's nicer than the blog because it's not dated, it's more permanent. It looks like yeah, it looks like something bigger. Any feedback?
Picture from 30 years ago.
Picture of whatever you want. Yeah, so there's no deadline on this if you see something when you look at it.
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, I think this looks really amazing. I wonder if there's like a default picture that we can have for folks that don't want to have their actual picture.
Yeah, I can put like a fake.
It can just be the CD logo too, yeah, or just whatever that default Facebook great person is.
Sounds good.
I'd also like to link the repo to
Yes.
on this page, so it can either be beside join the initiative as well. Also, hi Natalia.
Hello. Sorry, I joined a bit later.
It's okay. We're going over some of our administrative stuff and then we'll get into birds of a feather. But if you want to throw a quick introduction, we'd be happy to have you.
Sure. I am a data engineering manager, currently between jobs, but in my last job, I built some CI/CD pipeline for my, CI without continuous part, mostly deployment automation for my BI team that I led in that role. And it was Jenkins and similar kind of tools, Flyway and such. That's all. And I met Lisa a few times. Well, yesterday, first time actually in person, but I'm pretty sure I followed her posts, and I hope to attend Lisa's event tomorrow to learn more about CI/CD pipelines.
Very happy to hear that. I also see somebody else has joined, Iris. Do you want to throw a quick introduction for the group? If you can hear us, if not, then you're free to type it in the chat, but we're also happy to have you introduce yourself later as well. Or if you want to take a backseat for the meeting, that's totally okay as well. Let's see. Why don't we continue on with reviewing the main page then?
Yeah, for the repo, where did you say you wanted it? Like up here? We could
Yeah, I'm thinking either up there or because we
I'll
don't
put the
really
GitHub logo and then
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Because if we hit join the initiative right now, that goes to the mailing list, I assume.
Goes to the form.
The sign up form, yeah. I don't want to do too many links, but of the 3 links that I can think of that might be appropriate. It's join the initiative, which is the form, and then it's probably the Slack channel that we have, as well as the repo. Yeah, so the Slack is there. Okay, yeah.
I can put it up. I don't mind. I just thought people always look at the bottom for these things.
Yeah.
I can also put the repo also down here, as well as at the top.
What do people think? Because we're not utilizing the repo a ton now, but I do want to ramp it up in the future as like our resource hub.
Can you still see my screen I'm on the repo now?
Yeah. Let's put the repo up there actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That gives me more incentive to work on it a little bit more, knowing that people are going to be staring at it. Okay.
Okay. I think that's it for my screen sharing.
Yeah. I guess we can plug tomorrow's webinar as well really quickly. Folks here
Yes.
probably do know about it, but let me share my
Here's the
screen.
link.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit last time about our continuous delivery workshop session that we're doing. So the next one will be fundamentals of DataOps. So we also talked a little bit last time about how I could sort of tweak my presentation to be a little bit more suitable for the DevOps group. The feedback was amazing. I've implemented some of the changes, but I still have some other changes to go because I'm just a very last minute person and I don't do things on time. So more than welcome to come as well. We're recording it. But our next workshop after this in May, that's kind of like within the DataOps vein, will be something along the lines of configuring and deploying DBT models with Terraform, for instance. And so I got in touch with a woman named Katie who kind of presented this as like an analytics engineering thing, and I wanted her to give it to us. And so when we get sort of these details together, we'll probably double check it with the group to see if the branding and the stuff is right. I know, Roxanne, you've also kind of gotten in touch with her to see what it would be like. So yeah, I think I'm not going to plug this too much because again, I feel like my face is too much in these meetings and too often. But generally speaking, I think the quick piece of feedback I want for the group is, do you guys think that outright kind of saying, CI/CD for DBT models is too specific, or should it be something like, analytics engineering for DevOps engineers or something like that? So for those of you who don't know, DBT is an open source project that a lot of folks in data use to build data models off of and to kind of, use to manage their relational data. And so it's very specific though, and it's not something that outside of analytics engineering, a lot of folks know about.
I only have inside of data analytics perspective. Unfortunately, but there the DBT is well known. I mean, I'm looking at different job posting, and pretty much everywhere they use that for SQL deployments. And the fact that I used Flyway in the past, it kind of stands out as an odd thing.
Yeah.
So people who would be looking to learn more, they probably might have searched for DBT specifically as well.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting framings for this is, and I was talking to her about it too, is whether or not it should be posited as, okay, you're an analytics engineer and you want to learn the basics of CI/CD for these specific processes that you use regarding DBT, or you're a DevOps engineer, you have an analytics engineer that uses DBT, you have no idea what it is, but you need to kind of make this production ready at some point. And so there's two very different perspectives. And one of the unique things about this initiative is that it blends both, but we have to pick and choose sometimes which perspective we want to take. Roxanne, I don't know if you have any insight of whether or not we have more of the data engineering folks or more of the DevOps folks represented.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a look at that. But
Yeah,
I think for now,
yeah, we could add that as a question if you want for the future, but or we could just take a poll.
Yeah. So my instinct is to make this more of an intro to analytics engineering than like assuming that everybody has DBT knowledge coming in. And I think that might be the better blend of both worlds. So, and then if we want to do like a more in-depth part 2, then we can, where we've done this prerequisite of like introducing DBT and like different configurations that you can do with it. And then this is it in like practice or action.
Sounds good.
I think the next thing is the spotlight. I'm gonna skip over that because I don't want to look at my face right now.
No, I just wanted to say that we did it.
Appreciate it. I'm very happy to have the spotlight featured. There's been some really amazing CDF ambassadors that have been spotlighted before, so definitely appreciate it. And so yeah, I think the next thing that we want to go into, I don't think we have too many updates for the landscape right now. That's kind of
I just heard from them and they said it should be no problem to do it because I asked because they host all of them and I wanted to make sure that we could do it. And they said, yeah, it should be no problem.
Okay, fantastic. The other update that I'll go into it after, but I think for the blog post as well. So Victor, I haven't had a chance to go super in depth for your blog post yet. Do you know if anybody's been able to give you any feedback so far?
So far, I hadn't heard from anyone.
Okay, so I'll do it this week then. Sorry, I've been very all over the place these past couple weeks, but this week I'm gonna sit down and get to it. So Victor has put together this amazing blog post. And so one of the things that we do as part of this initiative is that we write blogs and then we provide feedback on each other before we kind of publish it. And so if anybody wants to take a look at it or read through it or provide some initial comments, please do. I'm gonna do a very in-depth review for this week. And so that's kind of on my to-do list. So I will get to it this week as well, and then I'll kind of add a little bit on data cataloging. So I do appreciate that you put it together. Fantastic. I also see somebody named Quinn has joined us, although Iris has left. So if you want to introduce yourself, you're more than welcome to and add yourself to the meeting notes. But generally, we're just kind of wrapping up some of the admin stuff that we go over in this meeting. And then we're going to get into the birds of a feather discussion pretty soon. And so I think the next piece that I wanted to add as a side note, and I don't want to totally add it into the meeting minutes just yet, but LFAI and Data is going to be doing probably a mini summit also around that time. And one of the things that we've discussed, and this is literally like half an hour ago that we had this discussion, was getting the working group members together of different branches and then having them on a panel for AIML. So we can discuss maybe having like our MLOps SIG lead come in and be on that panel. I could also serve on that panel as well. And we can discuss as that shapes up who might be the person to be there in terms of both CDF. And so we'll discuss it probably more in the next meeting, but just a heads up for anybody who's going to be at the Open Source Summit North America, that we're going to be having like more satellite events around as well, including maybe like a little DataOps meetup, or at least like some CDF stuff that we can go to, but also hoping more cross functionality with LFAI and Data. All right. And I think that's all for the boring admin stuff. We can get into the fun stuff now. And so our birds of a feather for this meeting is going to be CI/CD in AIML, which is intentionally very vague and open-ended. And so I'm going to kind of kick off the discussion by kind of saying that any level of expertise that you have in this area is welcome. Don't feel like you have to be an expert in order to participate. Asking really basic questions is actually how we start to define some of these things. And part of this initiative is really bringing forth a set of materials, but also a common understanding and agreement of what the basic standard is, right? What it is that we actually want to use when we define some of these terms. And so please don't feel like intimidated by any of the topics, although I think that for this one, we're going to try and keep it very introductory level. And of course, don't feel afraid to ask stupid questions. We're keeping it loose so that we can go on tangents, and I want us to be able to go on tangents and to be able to go into these weird rabbit holes. And so I'm going to start off by kind of doing a quick round of the room, sort of what people have run into when it comes to CI/CD in AIML, or what they think that it kind of is defined as. And any sort of like really quick initial top level thoughts on sort of the state. So I'll get started and then we'll kind of do a quick round as I poke people. So for me, I think CI/CD and AIML is really this idea of having continuous integration and of course continuous deployment in like AIML pipelines. So if you're looking at how do we prepare data, how do we mark data, how do we process data, and then within the data platform itself, how do we actually serve it in the application, but also if we take a machine learning application or generative AI application, what are the processes that we need in terms of like maintenance over time and observability to keep it performing. I think that's one of the tough things about AIML applications is that there is like a drift over time. And so if you're not constantly watching it and monitoring it, it's like not just going to break, but it's actually going to return wrong results. And sometimes you don't necessarily know what that is. And I think that's kind of one of the interesting things of it. Victor, I'm going to pass it to you next if you want to throw some quick thoughts in terms of what you think CI/CD and AIML is.
Yeah, there are so many things that can be talked about, so it's hard to start from. So let me just maybe post this link. This one I didn't cover in the document I created for InfoOps. So this is about data agent. It's because agentic AI is very popular, really the hottest term, even within the AI community, it's the hottest term right now. And data agent is one type of agent that basically go all around the place and get information from different sources and do its thing, right, to provide information. So now the question is, in order to support data agent, what are the necessary because the data agent itself is software, right? It's written in software. So the traditional DevOps tools, Jenkins, all those GitOps, will all play in a way to support data agent. Let me just stop at that place and see anyone else have any thought on, what do you think is necessary for data agent And the current CI/CD pipeline, what should need to be done to support data agent?
Oh, that's awesome. I love that you're taking this backwards approach, which probably is more appropriate in terms of, in order to get this one thing working, what is the work that needs to happen to enable it? That's awesome. Natalia, do you want to go next?
So yesterday at the event that I went to, thanks Lisa for organizing it. I learned about the kind of on-demand provisioning of agents to solve certain problems. So that, in my head, it was container that's provisioned. This code is deployed there, then it runs there, then it returns some results, and you take it down. This is kind of just a regular container kind of orchestration framework should be around that, just to support that functionality, right?
Awesome. And Jesse, do you want to throw in any initial thoughts? It doesn't have to be on agents, by the way. I think that we've already kind of started to go down a rabbit hole, even in the introductions.
Yeah, admittedly, this is getting into deep waters for me. I guess I would say as a overall, from an outsider perspective, how do you compare the CI/CD pipeline relative to, say, if I'm coming from a complete outsider perspective, like relative to, if I'm familiar with Agile, I'm familiar with Scrum, I've done some software development, like what, I guess for lack of a better term, like why do I care as somebody who's going to be transitioning to, say, more of this style of platform?
And Quinn, I'm happy to open the floor for you as well, but don't feel like you super need to participate if you would prefer to take a backseat for this one. Yeah, maybe, yeah, okay. Take a backseat for now. Okay, for sure. No worries. We're happy to have you join in on any future meetings, or you can always, hang out, and we're happy to have you either way in any capacity. So I think there's a common thread, I think, between what everybody has mentioned and said, which is, let's say that we are a company and we want to deploy some sort of AI solution. We've landed on agents as one of them, and we have to kind of work backwards from the machine learning side or from the AI side back to the software engineering side and go, okay, this is what we want to build. But we have this sort of like expertise of, we know what sort of functionality we want it to have, but we don't really know the rest around it. Whereas I think the software engineers or the application developers will have to go, okay, what is it that we're even trying to get to as a first place? And so I think one of the interesting questions here is how you would explain the steps of what would need to be done to deploy an agent to like an external team, or even if it is right to bring an external team in from the application or core software engineering perspective, or should it just live in sort of like the data or AI ML team's purview, and what that ownership looks like. I'm happy to open up to the floor if anybody wants to add some stuff in.
I think that like a standard or interoperability, or I don't know how to say that, but I think if you're deploying something that's new, you also want people to be able to understand it. So yeah, that's what I would have to say.
It will cost money, right? So I'll start from this perspective. So you need some budget for running anything in production. So you have to negotiate the value that it brings to business, starting from that. Then you need to allocate dedicated people to that, and can be, depending on the organization, it can be a very different set of people. As Lisa has mentioned, they can come from, software engineering background, or data team can participate. In my case, I didn't participate in such project, but I've seen companies where it happens. And then you could still have ops team if you have one dedicated ops team to support this initiative, and then you would have a collaboration of sorts between all these different players.
Yeah, I really like that line of thought, because I think that unless you're providing some sort of business value, then nobody will really want to invest so much in it. And when we think about developing agents in particular, I think that It's always much more expensive than we think. And part of the reason why is because you're not just building an agent, but you're having to overhaul your entire data infrastructure to support this agent. So you need to justify this agent in some way, right? Because we need to serve it in very specific ways. And so when I think about something like an agent, I think a lot of alignment with internal platform. If we're going to do something internal, so let's say we have like a chat bot, or we have some sort of like agent that can assist like my coding, and I need it to crawl like, let's say the docs or something that's internal to our company. A lot of that is embedded in sort of like the developer experience of my company, or even if I were to build like a data agent, something that needs to work through the internal data that we have in the company, that's still sort of data platforming. So when I develop the agent, do I want that internal platform to maintain and own that agent, or do I want somebody else too that has maybe more expertise in developing agents? And I'm gonna call on Victor to add some stuff here, even though he did not raise up his hand.
Okay. I mean, if I gonna search for keyword, it'll be AI agent or workflow, right? So I actually found one actually, but it's let me see whether you can see it. So let me see. This is, I think, a good. I don't know if you can see this. This need a registration. So the title for this one is transforming CI/CD with AI agents, right? So really, it is about the traditional CI/CD pipeline and agent. Where's the intersection? And obviously, agent itself can help with the CI/CD pipeline, because there's a new concept. I'm not sure you've heard about. It's wipe programming, wipe coding. And it's basically, the idea is everything will be done. 90% of the coding will be done using AI. So for programmers, the task from really remembering and doing everything from ground up is no longer necessary. You can just start, say, okay, someone give me a business requirement. I'm going to start with a web coding principle and and tell AI, which is mostly driven by agents, to create the code for me. Everything it's not just the front end, it's ground up, full stack. After that, the programmer, who used to be a programmer, now become a programmer/agent manager, and will be responsible for managing the architecture and see whether the code generated by AI, it makes sense. And then, in addition, the human will be also to see, the meet security requirement, also business requirements, scalability requirements. So yeah, and that process need to be kind of guideline, right? Because if you just for especially for more junior developers, that's not easy, right? He doesn't have all the years of experience. So having a CI/CD pipeline, such as even the traditional Jenkins, right? If it can play a role in making that happen, kind of providing a guardrail for using something like Copilot to generate code, that will be helpful. So that's just how agent affect the CI/CD pipeline. Uh, uh, just, reverse that role, right? So how CI/CD pipeline is going to help the agent, right? The agent is just software, right? So CI/CD pipeline is going to manage all the software code that's really just running the agent. And so the CI/CD pipeline need to worry about not only the traditional, just where the code release, different versions, collaborations, but it's also going to be responsible for things like security. Did the agent did it correctly? Once the code is generated, how do I tell whether it's something created by human or created by agent? How do I decide whether it's something that I should learn that can be future best practices? So yeah, so it's kind of that's why the info ops applies, right? So it's no longer about which is chicken, which is egg. It's kind of a both. It's kind of two-way communication there. Okay, let me stop there for now.
Oh, those are some amazing insights. And I love that you went into sort of the reverse of AI/ML and CI/CD and CI/CD in AI/ML. I think that it is kind of a pipe dream to feel like all of the code that we auto generate with AI will be usable. I think that sometimes it's really hard like it can make more work for the developers in the end if you have this giant legacy code base, but it's all been kind of made using AI, and then you kind of have to figure out the parsing around it and how you want to refactor the entire thing. So I think that there's a really large risk there as well, but eventually that, like over maybe a decade or something, we'll get to the point where maybe we get to better code quality. One of the questions that I want to posit out is whether or not traditional CI/CD frameworks that we have right now. So if I think about it, like maybe like a GitOps framework or Circle CI or Jenkins, are actually even ready to, deploy or something like an agent. And when I think about that, I think almost not. And what would need to happen for them to be able to get to the place where they are ready? Like if I were to deploy an agent using Jenkins, that sounds cool in theory, but I feel like in reality, I would not be able to do that. And what are some of the limitations that we would see around that, if anybody wants to jump in? Or not, that's cool too.
No, but I feel like when you said Jenkins, they're always worried about security.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that would, that would be top of mind for them before they get into anything new. They'll want to make sure that it'll be fine,
Yeah, like even right now, I'm just looking at like a normal Jenkins workflow, and I feel like a lot of it misses some of the statefulness that is probably required, because that's kind of one of the tough things about AI ML applications, is that the data is incredibly important and the features are incredibly important in terms of reproducibility. And so it's not just the code itself, but it's the context and it's the state. And so let's say you're evaluating different agentic responses, you need to be able to trace it. But the governance is also a really big part of that as well, in terms of being able to know, which agents are able to access what pieces of data, and then reproducing both the state of that data as it was at the moment with the permissions that you needed and storing that configuration somewhere, and then also the code that produced the agent itself.
Yeah, actually I'm just posting another one. So I
Every
searched very
time we have
fast.
one of these, I walk away with 5 new links and like millions of tabs.
Yeah, talking about Jenkins. Jenkins is old, obviously, but it's widely adopted, so it's not going to be going anywhere. It's going to be there for a long time, because there's rich libraries in lots of plugins. So this article I posted is about Jenkins, and it's called domain specific knowledge. In this case, actually including the LangChain, which is quite a popular agentic development workflow tool. And even LangChain, by the way, some say is kind of a bulky, kind of old. So I guess some new startup that's building a different LangChain, newer versions, sort of a new generation, saying LangChain is not good enough. So I know this is always opinionated. So I would say, yeah, everybody will have a role to play in this, including Jenkins, because most of the enterprises still using the Jenkins internally. And in order to really use the existing code base and existing workflow to extend to an agent, it is necessary to have a kind of integration. And that article go into details about that.
Yeah, I like the fragment about security part. So think about it, what we do with software. If we do CI/CD of sorts, we are doing some kind of automated framework that builds something, potentially deploys to some environment, let's say maybe temporary environment, runs some tests using predefined scenarios that are pre-scripted, and then verifies the responses, and then if everything goes well, it promotes this code to next stage, whatever that is. Maybe you have a human in the loop approving this deployment, maybe you don't. So here you have very similar situation here, except that there's a little bit of maybe slight difference with where the data and states are stored. for agents. I think they have dedicated database in my opinion. Again, from what I've seen, very small exposure I had. So they're not stored in Jenkins, kind of outside. They come together with this container of agent. Maybe there is something else that has database, a small storage, feature store, etc., etc. So, but I've never seen it in production, so I don't know how it would work.
And then there's also performance. If everything is AI generated, it's probably not the best, most concise code for your company, and it might slow things down. So how do you go back and fix that as well to make sure that your CI/CD is quick in deploying? I always think about performance because my partner is the performance engineer, and that's all he talks about.
That's a really interesting point, though. But before I add in like my 2 cents, I just want to say, who called Jenkins? Who called LangChain old, Victor? Please name and shame. Name and shame. Name and
It's
shame.
there
That is
somewhere. I can find it. I can
Oh
dig it
my
out.
gosh.
Yeah.
That is in the DevOps world, that feels painful. That's hilarious though. But so there's this idea then, I think that's sort of brought up as a side tangent to security, is when we think about our CI pipelines too, we do think about continuous testing as part of that. And now do we also have to consider continuous evaluation? And how does that even work in terms of how we package that in a way that's manageable and performant? And is it within Jenkins? I feel like probably not, but do we then write like a direct connector or some sort of way to merge these different platforms together? Like say something like an ML flow and a Kubeflow integrated into Jenkins in some way with like some other framework. And what would that architecture even look like, I guess? But yeah, so Natalia, you kind of mentioned seeing something like that. And have you seen anything else, or do you feel like there were any big roadblocks to what they faced when trying to deploy?
I've never worked with ML Flow, so I'm just scanning Google. Sorry. To
Or
find out a
I mean,
little more.
in the architecture that you just mentioned previously.
Oh, the previous architecture, I went to some tutorial at Google Cloud recently to just kind of one day AI tutorial, and they had end-to-end lifecycle with deploying a service, essentially. That one was based on some kind of containerization framework, I think Docker. And again, I didn't go in depth. It was focused on different topic, this tutorial. And they used some database to store a few things behind the scenes. And I think in modern frameworks, I heard Ray is used for some feature store commonly. I would imagine you would provision something like that together with your system every time to start fresh. And then you would have some pre-trained models that you load, and then you evaluate them using predefined scenarios. I mean, what else can you do? Guardrails do the same thing. Essentially, they don't do anything besides that. They have scenarios. They validate that your platform performs as expected within the scenarios, sometimes using another agent to do that validation as well.
And for those of you who don't know, Ray is like a distributed training and processing framework. And so let's say that you have like many different nodes or many different clusters and a huge amount of distributed data that you want to train your models off of. Ray is kind of one of those frameworks that you will use to execute that pretty much. And it's a pretty big project. So, but I don't know how they even integrate with CI/CD. Like I know that they do like some sort of orchestration, but I haven't looked too deeply into it.
Can you drop a link to it?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, I think I might have mixed few things into that. So I'm still very new to Ray, and I don't even know what ML Flow does and Ray in detail. But I see that it's used in.
It's okay. I mean, we're still kind of even figuring out like, okay, I mean, we're not figuring out the basics of, but I think from my side, I even have to see more use cases of Jenkins because I personally don't work with Jenkins at all. And so I need to this is kind of the challenge of a working group like this too, is that we're all in different places.
I wanted to invite someone from Jenkins so we could have their point of view as well. That would be nice.
I think that would be great, especially after having had this conversation. Like, I'm just gonna Google Jenkins and Ray and see if anybody's attempted.
That seems like a
Ray.
strange combination for me because Jenkins does similar to old. And the way that
Right?
we used it and the reasons why we used it is because it was around already used somewhere else since a while.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people still use it though.
Yeah, I mean, I also wonder too if there's a place, like I might be looking for something that doesn't either need to exist or should not exist for very real reasons. Like, is there, like, are we setting ourselves down a pipeline by thinking, oh, should these two worlds meet? And
Yeah,
I'm,
maybe not.
yeah,
Or
maybe they shouldn't.
I just posted looks like there's a library from Anyscale, which is basically the vendor behind Ray. It's a library it's called Ray Data. That's a library used for loading data into the Ray framework. Yeah, I don't think the Jenkins and Ray, they are completely different, but I think they should intersect. There's a lot of, just like I said, Ray's producing new models that could be creating code which Jenkins manage, and vice versa. Somebody could be building a library that's an application that's using the model that Ray support, either trained or inference. Well, actually, Ray is mostly focusing on, it does both, but the inferencing part, I think that actually is more popular.
So I am doing some intense, not just Googling, but DuckDuckGoing right now. And every single front page that I'm looking at has nothing in terms of the intersection of these two worlds, to be honest. I don't know if anybody has really done it or is trying it or what that is. So that's kind of interesting worlds though, because I feel like really only machine learning engineers touch Ray. But when I think about like the compute management, I feel like that's probably like also on the DevOps side, same with the FinOps side of things and kind of managing those clusters as well. So there's, I feel like this is sort of like I don't know, this is like a really weird area. Like it's almost like a little fever dreamy to think of Ray and, and Jenkins marrying together. But it's such an interesting topic to discuss. Like what parts of Ray would even work here? Let me look
Ray provide the frameworks for AI training and inference, right? So
yeah.
it's a where Jenkins is all about software CI/CD pipeline. So like if I'm organization, right now, most likely I don't have Ray. Most likely I have Jenkins. Now my CIO, CEO says, now we need to go AI, and that's where if you don't come up with some project ideas, you won't get budget for next year. They got to have some AI in it. And then someone went to the Ray conference, say, okay, cool, I want to do some Ray there. But where do I start? All my libraries supporting my financial, my accounting, my front end, my databases is all in Jenkins. How does the two worlds work together? First of all, I guess I already have Jenkins, so I don't need to do anything about that. I'm going to install infrastructure, maybe either Ray infrastructure on bare metal virtual machine or on Kubernetes. Once I've done that, I say, so how do I use this? And then invite my Jenkins developers who use Jenkins to come to develop some applications. So they're cool, we're gonna do something. And then we already download some open source model, which is start to be running on Ray framework to do some inferencing work, right? So, but the application is business. So the person who previously only know Jenkins now had to know Ray. How to integrate them together? It's up to the developer business need. But I know there's no direct integration between the two, but there's a need for those two worlds to intersect.
Interesting. I think that the flow that you described makes sense. And I'm actually really impressed that you came up with that on the fly because I was having a hard time conceptualizing it, to be honest.
Me too. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, let's have a Victor appreciation
Why
day
are
for the
you
guy who came up
retiring,
with-
Victor?
Yeah. That's really awesome. And I think it does make sense, but is the incentive for those two worlds like I as an application developer have a very high incentive to integrate right into my workflows, especially if I'm going to be kind of in charge of deploying this. But me as a Ray developer, I could care less about what happens almost afterwards once I'm done my training. And so I wonder, like the ownership for that is definitely, I feel like, on the DevOps side of things of whoever owns Jenkins, but they won't have the expertise to develop the integration. Let's see. Do you guys know if there's any Kubeflow in Jenkins integration? I wonder if that would be in between. Oh, this is a cool.
In fact, sometimes companies have more than one orchestration framework, and it's okay because some teams prefer to use more modern tools. So at my past company, we also had Harness as an example, but it could have been something else.
Could you explain Harness a little bit to us?
Well, I haven't worked with it very closely, but it permitted to work with Kubernetes cluster, and it would do essentially very similar things, but it was just a little bit more kind of UI driven. It also had more direct integrations with different tools. So you could set up more hooks, with Git and similar frameworks. And I think it probably worked better with Kubernetes than Jenkins, let me guess. I found something about slightly different framework, which is Google Kubernetes Engine. I guess this is an orchestrator similar to Jenkins or Harness. And then this one has Kube, Ray, Kubernetes, and all that. And even MLflow that you mentioned today.
Yeah. Can we would it be too messy in the meeting minutes to add all these blog posts in?
I was just gonna do that actually. So hold on.
Yeah,
You keep talking.
I feel like in 3 months I'm gonna be reminded in a conversation of this, and I'm gonna want to go back and poke people on it. But I forgot about KubeRay for a second. I was just thinking about Kubeflow. Yeah, this is very Google heavy infrastructure if they're leveraging pretty much Vertex. I guess SageMaker probably has something similar.
Did you say Vertex? Is that still around?
Vertex AI is Google's like internal or
Oh, yeah.
GCP
Cool.
AI.
There got to be some non-Google related articles. I just found this one first.
Yeah. Also as a yeah, same with mine. This is also an interesting one too. So just because if I see anything in GCP, I want to look at the AWS equivalent. And so there are like pre-built SageMaker pipelines that leverage Jenkins. And this is actually quote unquote old. It's from 2021, whatever that means. And so there's quite a bit of support for this on the other side. I'm going to share my screen here, and you guys are going to have to forgive just how many tabs have been opened in the last little bit. And so this is I'm gonna bring this back down. So this is SageMaker's architecture with Jenkins. And I like that Jenkins is just this tiny little thing on the side top right. But this is the closest thing I can see of having these. And I mean, you can kind of switch out your SageMaker pipelines and all of these things with whatever open source architecture frameworks that you have. But it's very similar to what I think Victor had mentioned before of having your deployment pipelines and your code up here in terms of application. But the actual valuation happens, you can see at the bottom as well. And so I don't know what code star does, but some of this seems to make sense to me. And so if we were to look at something like Ray or Kubeflow or MLflow, where you would have your pipeline management, I think it would be a mix of both, above at the top here, your model deploy pipeline, as well as your evaluation pipeline, your registration.
Actually, as a matter of fact, I know the public cloud providers. This is, Amazon is being a public cloud. So they build some very nice cloud services, including their cloud-based CI/CD pipelines for users to use, much easier, user-friendly. However, internally, and I'm not sure about Amazon because Amazon is a relatively newer company compared with some of the older software company, right? So the existing older software company, which one, they a lot of them have Jenkins in-house. So even if you see a new public infrastructure, most likely those code are in Jenkins.
Yeah, definitely. I guess one of the bigger questions here then is, why is there so little talk about it or resources about it? I mean, we've done a 5-minute Google, which in my opinion is pretty deep research. But generally speaking, I think that when even looking at reference architectures for this, it's been really hard and tricky as well. But you're completely right in that a lot of these houses build using Jenkins, and there's a lot of different companies out there, even data companies that I know, that implement Jenkins internally as well. But I don't necessarily know exactly how they've structured things and what they've decided to hand off and what they've decided to keep on Jenkins. Or even maybe what their configuration looks like.
Yeah, there's a book, not directly related. It's called Burden of Knowledge. Basically means there's so much existing knowledge and kind of a company-specific knowledge that's already built into that code base in Jenkins. So it's almost impossible for people to move to a different platform. Imagine if you, I don't know about Amazon. Let's just say Amazon example. Let's say if AWS was building on a code base managed by Jenkins, what will it take for it to port to Kapton? Almost impossible. That's why people, it just once you use Jenkins, which is very feature rich, although by the modern day standard this year, it's too clumsy in a way. But it's very feature rich. So it's impossible to move to a different platform easily.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a few minutes left before we end this meeting. And so I just want to do a quick round and open up for any last thoughts that folks might have. I know that we did not even touch the surface, to be honest, of all of the possible things we could talk about in CI/CD and AI/ML. So I just want to do like a round of closing statements, maybe people's general thoughts, and what they found interesting in this particular conversation too might be really cool to look at. And then we'll kind of wrap up and we'll probably figure something out for next meeting. I can kick it off. So yeah, I was surprised that this conversation went straight to Jenkins. We started out in such an interesting place and then we went right into Jenkins, but we went down this really interesting Jenkins rabbit hole. And Victor, I really appreciated your insights on this topic, actually, that we ended up here, because I think that it's such a relevant conversation to have. And I wonder who are the right people to have in a room like this to have this conversation. I know it's not me, to be honest. And so I'm very curious to be a fly on the wall of even that. But I love that we went from agents to Jenkins. I'll never. That's the most thing like DataOps initiative thing that I can think of. I'll pass it off to maybe Roxanne if you want to go next.
It's the most CDF thing ever, I would say. I invited a Jenkins person, Chris Stern, who was in those Google Summer of Code, like he was a mentor for those links that Victor sent. So he might have insights that would be interesting. He says he'd like to join, so maybe next time he'll be there. Yeah.
I found it personally also quite interesting because I apologize for bringing up Jenkins at all. That may have influenced everyone or tripped on that topic. But I do need to present a 10 minutes talk at Netflix Data Something Forum in April. And it's going to be about that thing I built for BI team with Jenkins and Flyway for SQL kind of Snowflake deployments. So seeing these diagrams and just chatting about it helped me a little bit to focus on what I'll be thinking.
It's Shinran's data engineering forum, right? Just at Netflix. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So thank you all for giving me some more thoughts and some good diagrams I can copycat the style from.
And Jesse, do you want to go next?
Sure. I actually really appreciate the immense amount of stuff to read through from yourself and Victor. I really appreciate Victor's point actually on talking about like the technical debt and the kind of nitnoid processes that I'm more familiar with of just how hard it is to change from things, and honestly like coming even away from systems that I'm sitting here going like, all right, I'm going to reach back to people I've worked with previously on projects, and because I think that there's some things that we probably were using some of these and had no idea just because it's what we had used for the last 5-10 years and nobody knew. It was just how it went.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation today. I thought that it went, so this is the first time that we've done Birds of a Feather for this meeting. And so I had no idea how we would go, to be honest. And it was just as random and fun as I was expecting it to be. And so we can do more structured ones in the future where we have like more of a defined scope. But I think for a first one, this was good for us to practice our voices and to get into the flow of like what even it looks like to improve upon. So happy to have any feedback in terms of how better to run the Birds of a Feather. If you prefer something more structured, I'm happy to do that as well. If you like this sort of like loose go, everybody starts opening a Google page and we just paste random links, I'm happy to do that as well. I also love that Natalia came in from like the analytics engineering, data engineering, but she's the Jenkins culprit in the it's too easy to go, oh, it must have been a DevOps person that mentioned Jenkins, but no, we're gonna have a lot of different mixes here. Right. Well, we're at time. Thank you all for coming and hopefully see you in 2 weeks. And please do plug any DataOps stuff that you have in the Slack channel, random links that you find, talks that you want to promote, things like that. We're happy to create a platform for you. Okay. All right. See you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.